Hi, I'm Bud Summers. Welcome to guitar lesson number 5. In this lesson, we're going to talk about changing chords more quickly and efficiently. This is a problem for beginners and even more advanced players, figuring out the best way to get from one chord to the next. Last lesson, lesson 4, we talked about pivot and guide fingers. We used the A chord and we fingered it like this as an example where we had that pivot finger going from an A to a D, and we had the guide finger from an A to an E to D, back and forth. We used those 3 chords to kind of figure out what was going on with pivot and guide fingers, and hopefully you're getting that idea down. Now today, I just want to look at some general things that make sense that we don't always think about. A lot of people like to play their G chord like this, and that would be with your first finger on the 5th string at the 2nd fret, and your second finger here on the 6th string at the 3rd fret, and then your 3rd finger here. Sounds fine, and that's all well and good. And if you're going to an E minor chord, you could leave that first finger right there and finger it this way. You might say, well, I always play my E minor chord like this with my 2nd and 3rd fingers. Well, again, we're trying to figure out different maps. Now, you wouldn't drive the same way to go to 2 different places, so why would you finger a chord the same way if you're going to a different chord after it? Okay, so think about where you're going. This is, always planning ahead to where you're going to be. That said, if we can learn to do our G chord instead of doing it like this with your 1st, 2nd, and 3rd fingers, if you can get used to doing it with your 2nd finger here on the 5th string at the 2nd fret, your 3rd finger on the 6th string at the 1st fret, and then your 4th finger, pinky over there on the 1st string at the 3rd fret. Some people say, well, I can't use my 4th finger very well, it's not very strong. It will only get stronger if you work on it, okay? This is a nice thing, though. Now, if I'm going from a G to a C, which is pretty common, if I'm going to a G to a C, boom, I'm right there and I'm there. Think about the movement. If I'm going from my G, if you're playing it this way, I've got to do this. That's a pretty big shift. Get used to looking at the guitar. Think of that small space. You're saying, well, I'm only moving my finger a couple inches. Well, on the guitar, a couple inches is a huge move. We're talking about partial inches, quarters of inches that make a huge difference in the way things sound. So it's relative. If I'm going G to C here, boom, I've got that. That's a pretty big move. Why not just do it like that? Another chord that comes in mind, I just mentioned the E minor just a second ago. Now, if you're playing a G chord here and doing it with the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th fingers, that's an easy switch right over there. You got a pivot finger on the 5th string. You just bring your your 3rd finger over to the 4th string there. So you got a little pivot finger going there. Now, also, if you're going from an E minor to a C, which is another fairly common chord change. C chord, we got our 1st finger on the 2nd string at the 1st fret, and we got our 2nd finger here on the 4th string at the 2nd fret, our 3rd finger on the 5th string at the 3rd fret. I can, instead of doing my E minor, if I'm going to an E minor from the C, instead of doing that big switch, I can just slide that back. So, in conclusion, I'd just like to say, be open to different ways of doing the fingerings for chords, and it will help you change faster from one to another. Be mindful of pivot and guide fingers. Be mindful of being able to move a pair of fingers together. When I'm on this C chord, my 2nd and 3rd fingers can just move right over, okay, to get to that G chord. Okay, so just be aware of where you're going. Don't be afraid to drive a different route to get to your location. Thank you. I'll see you again soon.